Motoring 2012 on TSN is brought to you by Michelin, a better way forward.
When the sun is shining, it doesn't get much better than this, and this is British Columbia. And it's the site for what I believe was one of the most anticipated vehicle launches in a long time. The vehicle comes from a company called Land Rover. And you know, Land Rover, maybe with the exception of the Range Rover Sport, is not a company known for pushing the design envelope. However, customers appear to be happy as sales are up about 22%. But you know, back in 2008, Tata Motors purchased Land Rover Jaguar. Tata has a lot of cash, and maybe it was Tata who suggested maybe this company should come up with something a little edgier, maybe just a little different. Well, different is a new vehicle called the Evoque. Oh, and a warning to current Range Rover owners, this is a vehicle not for you.
This is a very new, stylised Range Rover, loosely based off the mid-size platform, which is the LR2, but with a 90% of complete new content. So a few little bits from LR2, but aside from that, a completely new vehicle for us.
No, the guy wearing the wellies and the oilskin jacket, no, this is a different crowd. This is not duck hunters and country guys. This is a young urban market. For one thing, this one does not have a 2-speed transfer case, which separates it from a lot of other Land Rovers and Range Rovers. So it's not as good off-road. It's good off-road, but it's not like a Range Rover Sport or an LR3 or something like that. So it's a different vehicle altogether.
They specifically put Range Rover on the front of the Evoque. They didn't put Land Rover for a reason, and that's because it's a luxury brand and they want to be known as a luxury brand.
Right. Yeah, that adjusts your hill descent speed.
The reality of this car is that the breadth of capability is phenomenal, and I've spent 2 years developing most of the off-road systems, the terrain response, the traction control, the dynamic stability control, and I'm telling you, this car can go anywhere. Whatever you put in front of it, it'll walk over. Powertrain is an inline 4-cylinder. It's a 2-litre with a turbo. It gives 240 brake horsepower, a really long flat torque curve, which is fantastic. It'll get you 0 to 60 in 7.1 seconds, so it's no slouch, and give you 28 mpg highway.
Here we are in the top of Whistler Blackcomb, and we're spending some time in Vancouver, and that's kind of this vehicle. You know, it's a Range Rover, but it's the lightest, most fuel efficient, smallest Range Rover ever. You know, we have a starting price under $47,000 for the 5-door, but you know, whether you're going to the Opera House or coming up here skiing, you'll be equally comfortable. We think it'll be a younger, more urban customer for sure. It'll be more appealing. We think 80-90% will be Conquest customers because it is a brand new entry for Range Rover in this segment.
I'm kind of confused about the market for this vehicle. This is aimed at younger people, but it's got a price tag of well over $45,000 to start here in Canada. And young people, my understanding, don't have the money to spend on cars like that. Maybe Land Rover knows something we don't know, but this to me is an expensive car. I like it just fine, but I kind of ponder who's going to buy it.
I like the 5-door more than I like a 3-door. I always have. That's just me. I don't like the thought of being in a 3-door in the back and not being able to get out if there's an accident.
And you know, I have to agree with Luann on that. As a matter of fact, when I first laid eyes on this vehicle, I thought it might be a bit cramped back here, even in the 5-door. But once you're here, there's plenty of room. However, on the dynamic model, it comes standard with a panoramic roof. It looks really cool. But what happens if you happen to roll this thing?
The torsional stiffness of the body is unbelievable. I forget the numbers, but it's got an incredibly stiff monocoque steel body shell. We've used high-strength boron steels as well in the design. The glass is safety glass, so if it did go over, then everybody would be safe. But the fact is, this car's not going to go over unless you have a massive trip. We've got roll stability control, state-of-the-art stability control system using gyroscopic sensors, which will prevent that car from going over.
With Jaguar Land Rover, you know, even if we triple our volume, right, we're still going to be nowhere near the volume of some of our larger competitors, and that's okay because I think we can provide that exclusivity to that discerning customer that doesn't want to drive the same thing as everybody else. That being said, we do know that we need to expand the product lines on both sides, so that's the Evoque's one good example of how we think we can extend the Range Rover brand.
Yeah, I don't like the look of it that much, Brad. I think it's kind of a funny looking thing, but to drive, it's very comfortable. It's got good power. It seems to be pretty good on gas. It's good off-road. So, yeah, I do like it.
I think that Range Rover will have a hit on its hands because it's low enough that you could almost look at it and say 5 inches difference might be between that and a Mazda 3. Even if you're thinking about a Volvo station wagon, you can look at now a Range Rover Evoque.
Would I buy one? I don't think I spend $45,000 on one, but that's just me. You know, over the years I've discovered that if I don't like it, then there's another market that will probably buy it in vast numbers. So there you go.
Big trucks, little bicycles. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
With the mainstream market reaching near saturation point, more and more manufacturers are turning to niche products to increase their slice of the pie. On this edition of Test Drive, the Hyundai Veloster. The whole niche market has been exploding of late. The list of cars includes everything from the Honda Cross Tour to the new Mini Coupe. None of the players are designed to sell in numbers, but rather to offer something that does not exist elsewhere. The Hyundai Veloster more than fits that bill. It is overt in its styling and, as such, enjoys enormous road presence. Unfortunately, the bold style just does not transcend the sheet metal. One of the interesting features on this Veloster is a third door on the right side of the vehicle. Now, it really does ease access to the back seat. The problem is they forgot the headroom. The Veloster is powered by a 1.6-litre direct injection 4 that also features variable cam timing on both the intake and exhaust side. The combination puts forth 138 horsepower and 123 pound-feet of torque. Credit where credit is due. Even as it's forced to rev to redline, the noise the engine produces is not overwhelming. Now, this turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Given the stunning looks and the name of this vehicle, you'd expect it to have a modicum of velocity. Not. It takes 10 seconds to run to 100k and 7.3 seconds to do the 80 to 120 passing move. In the end, it's not a Veloster, it's a Slowster. The power is fed to the 215 40R18 front tyres through a 6-speed manual gearbox or optional twin-clutch automatic. The tester arrived with a do-it-yourselfer. The throws are respectively short, the gate is well defined, and the clutch is light and progressive, all of which means the manual is very easy to live with in a congested urban environment. Throw in a tight turning circle and it wheels about town very nicely indeed. You can order this Veloster with as much or as little equipment as you want. This one arrived loaded. Panoramic sunroof, a great dimension audio system and a navigation system with a backup camera. Not everything, however, is hunky-dory. The grab handles, they look great from a stylistic point of view, but they block the buttons that are situated behind them. And as with the rear seat, if you're over 6 feet, you need headroom. When it comes to handling, the Veloster does live up to its looks. Those 18-inch tyres provide plenty of grip as the suspension dials out most of the body roll. Through the pylons, the Veloster proved to be surprisingly good. The tendency to slip into understeer is controlled, and this in spite of the winter rubber it was wearing. If there is a wish, it would be for a little more feel from the steering. The electric assist is too light much of the time. On the flip side, the Veloster rides quite well. Only when it encounters a sharp bump does it feed the jolt back to its occupants. So there you have it, the all-new Veloster. This thing has got great looks and handling to match, but it needs more power, a usable back seat, and certainly more headroom. In the end, it comes across as being a very niche vehicle. One that's aimed at that 5'7" lonely guy.
More Prius, more possibilities. That's the marketing slogan Toyota have adopted for this 4th generation Prius V. Now, having been on Canadian roads for over a decade now, you say the name Prius and you automatically associate it with Toyota's hybrid technology. But there is one clear distinction between this latest generation and that of its 3 predecessors, in that this is a crossover. But what does the V actually stand for, and, well, who is this crossover targeted towards?
The Prius V is actually an addition to the Prius family. It's growing on our Prius liftback, and it actually offers more versatility, which is what V stands for, with 50% more cargo space.
Target market are young families. We were finding that we had a lot of customers who were young, active, and want the benefit of the hybrid Synergy drive system, and wanted in a vehicle that can meet their lifestyle needs. I want one vehicle that does it all and makes them feel better about the contribution they're making to their environmental stewardship in Canada.
The styling of it, in comparison to the competition, I don't think Prius really has that going for it. The statement that it makes, and it continues to make, is a green statement. And I think that sort of greenhouse look, the entire sort of feel of that car, it does win against the competition in respect to that, because there's absolutely no denying that you're driving a hybrid vehicle.
Now, I'm a fairly tall lad, and one of the features I particularly like being sat here in the back is I can actually adjust my seat. So it doesn't matter who you're sat behind, you're always going to have enough legroom. Now, all this extra space has meant that 105 kilos have been added to the Prius V's weight. So how have Toyota managed to achieve yet another best-in-class fuel economy rating?
We looked at weight-saving technology. For example, we have a polycarbonate roof. Rather than using glass up high, we're able to save a significant amount of weight, up to 38% of weight up high. Our engine and battery are the same as the Prius vehicle, which delivers class-leading 4.6 liters per 100 kilometers combined. But it is tuned to deal with the additional cargo space from Prius with a revised gear train.
I still think that's a dubious economic proposition. It's certainly not an environmental proposition, other than as a feel-good, look what I'm doing for the environment kind of thing. But I think it will expand their market.
We're being really bullish with this product, and we're really confident that Canadians will embrace it, and we're just really proud to be able to bring that ultimate, small crossover to the market that has hybrid Synergy drive, safety, cargo capacity, great environmental performance at a really incredible price, and with really great standard options.
Nobody loves pickup trucks more than me, but what I'm seeing in my crystal ball scares me. Want to know what I saw? Come to motoringtv.com and see me, Howard Elmer.
Mercedes is doing very, very well, so they're obviously selling cars and nothing is slowing them down. On the other hand, they got the most confusing lineup I can remember. Very confusing to me, and I'm in the business. I got to think that customers coming in and saying, well, what's that, might be a little confused as well.
Land Rover, of course, is hoping the new Range Rover Evoque will be a showroom success, although sales in North America have been pretty good. But if you've ever doubted that China was not the utopia for vehicle companies, Land Rover sales are up in China 103%.
China is a very strong market, and here in Vancouver, because we have a very large Asian community, in Canada about 10% of light vehicles are sold in BC. We're close to 24% on the Land Rover side. So we have a great affinity with our Asian market customers here.
Okay, now let's join Bill Gardner for his motoring tip of the week.
Our motoring tip of the week concerns boosting a vehicle with a dead battery. Now, if you're not absolutely sure of what you're doing, and/or able to identify the positive and negative terminals on both vehicles properly, you want to back off and wait till you've either got good enough lighting or someone who knows exactly the procedure. Now, if you go to your owner's manual, it'll often detail a good procedure for safely boosting a battery. First of all, identifying the terminals is very important. Look at your positive, look at your negative. The positive is usually color-coded red, the negative is black. Hook up your cables, and when you get to the dead car, you're going to hook up that positive connection, making sure that you don't touch any other metal part of the body or short anything out. And you're going to try and make your negative connection at the engine at a solid ground point. Could be a bolt or a bracket on the engine, but try and make that connection away from the battery if at all possible. Also, it helps to turn on the headlights on the dead vehicle, because you can use that as a bit of a diagnostic tool to see when you've got a good, solid, clean connection. When you start out with the headlights on the dead vehicle, you'll have little or no light from the headlights. When you make that last, final, solid connection, you'll see the headlights perk up, and that tells you you've got the good connection from both vehicles, and your dead vehicle is now going to crank reliably. Turner. And that's your motoring tip of the week.
Yes, Detroit is still known as the Motor City, and yes, it's home to what many believe is the most important auto show of the year. However, you have to travel to the West Coast and Los Angeles to experience a true motoring culture, because here the car is king and few can leave home without one. Yet for many years, the LA Auto Show has been an afterthought for many manufacturers. Until now.
There's a couple things that have been really, really important about the change and the elevation and status of Los Angeles. One is the change in date. A few years ago, it overlapped with the Detroit Auto Show. So when they made the decision to move away from Detroit, it really opened a window for us as manufacturers. LA has really opened this window of, hey, just before we get to the Detroit show and sort of the start of that winter circuit for auto shows, we've got this great opportunity to show some really exciting vehicles in Los Angeles. The other part, obviously, is with fuel prices and people looking at green technologies. California's always been at the forefront of, environmental and green, and where better to showcase technologies than Los Angeles?
California, it's the land of cars. Everyone uses their vehicle to get everywhere, and some communities don't even have sidewalks. You just get in your car and go. It's a huge market here. California's market is the same size as the entire Canadian market. So when California gets new vehicles, it's an indication of how it's going to go in the rest of North America.
LA sells all these high-end cars that do not show up at the Detroit Auto Show. For example, Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, Bentley. Those are things you do not see at the Detroit Auto Show. There might be a dealer that may have one vehicle of each, but you can't get near them because they're not the manufacturer. So the manufacturers of those high-end type cars tend to base themselves on the coasts, as they say. New York and LA, you'll see manufacturers of that. You don't see them at any other shows.
I've been here for a few years now, and certainly the car culture started in California, and it still lives in California. And yeah, you'll hear a lot about the gridlock and HOV lanes and fuel economy and all of these things, but Los Angeles is just such an important market that you really, you have to be in Los Angeles as a global manufacturer.
Motoring's Car of the Year for 2012 is... That's right, it's that time of year again. Join us for Motoring's Car of the Year show, hosted from the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. That's next week on Motoring.
Closed captioning of Motoring 2012 is brought to you by
Greener, fuel efficient, global. This is Chevrolet Now, driving our world forward.
We had another terrible tragedy in Toronto recently. A young mother who was also expecting was riding her bicycle in downtown Toronto. She was turning right, got tangled up with a large truck, and was crushed and killed. Now, there's not a family in Canada that hasn't been affected by a car crash at some point or other. This one is particularly sad. Now, I've talked before about the dangers of riding in downtown Toronto traffic, any city traffic really, on a bicycle, and I don't want to dwell on that, but particularly when you're near big trucks, you have to remember, they can't see you, and they don't even know you're there, so you got to give them a really wide berth. Now, this particular incident has raised cries from the cyclist community to put guardrails on large trucks to try and prevent people from being crushed by the vehicles. This is perhaps not the best example, but it's the closest truck we've got. They would be metal barriers that would come down like this between the wheels of the truck or the trailer on the transport truck to prevent someone from being dragged underneath. Now, the cost is, I've seen estimates anywhere from about $800 to $2,000 per vehicle, and that doesn't seem like a huge investment. Now, intellectually, you can't put a price on human life, but the fact is we have limited resources to put into traffic safety, and we have to put those resources where they can do the most good. I don't know how many types of collisions we have in this particular case. The last number I saw, I think, was something like 2, which obviously isn't a huge deal. One example of a very good cost-effective situation with truck safety was that reflective tape you'll see on the side of most transport trucks. That costs almost nothing, but it makes vehicles much more visible at night. So the National Safety Council in Ottawa has said that they haven't seen enough statistics to prove that guardrails would in fact be a cost-effective solution. But I know one thing for sure, you'll never convince the family of that mother that that isn't a great idea. I'm Jim Kenzie.
I mentioned before that if the new Evoque is as successful as the company hopes, Land Rover, with more product on the horizon, could become more than just a niche car company. As for the new Evoque, I love the design. Believe me, this car is a head-turner. And while it's very comfortable and able off-roading, on the highway, lots of power, and you're looking for an excuse to go on a long drive, it's that comfortable. Anyway, the job description for the Range Rover Evoque is quite simple. Attract 80 to 90% new customers into the showroom. And you know, for Land Rover, the party is just beginning. You ready for this? Tata Motors is going to spend over $11 billion in R&D on future product. The goal? To triple global sales. So there you go. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
As you say, very few people are taking up electric cars. The hybrid experiment seems almost to be over. I think this is something that Mazda is really onto here, and my question is, how much further can they go with this kind of technology?
Motoring 2012 on TSN has been brought to you by Michelin, a better way forward.